The bell above the door of Rosie's diner chimed as Marcus Holloway pushed it open, the familiar scent of coffee and grilled onions washing over him. He maneuvered his wheelchair through the narrow entrance, nodding a greeting to the regulars who looked up from their plates. It had been 6 months since he'd last set foot or wheel in his hometown of Millbrook, and the diner looked exactly as he remembered it. Marcus made his way to his usual corner booth, the one with the extra space that accommodated his chair without making him feel like he was blocking the aisle. As he settled in, he caught sight of his reflection in the window. The face that stared back at him was weathered, lines etched deep around eyes that had seen too much. His beard, once neatly trimmed, was now wild and peppered with gray. He barely recognized himself. A cheerful voice broke through his reverie. "Welcome to Rosie's. Can I start you off with some coffee?" Marcus turned, his breath catching in his throat as he met the waitress's gaze. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with a heart-shaped face and eyes the color of warm honey. But it wasn't her youth or beauty that struck him. It was the uncanny resemblance she bore to someone he'd tried very hard to forget. "Sir, are you okay?" the waitress asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Marcus realized he'd been staring. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile. "Sorry, just lost in thought. Coffee would be great, thanks." As she poured the steaming liquid into his mug, Marcus caught sight of her name tag. Lily. His heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be. Could it? Lily, he said, the name feeling strange on his tongue. That's a beautiful name. Named after anyone in particular? The girl's smile brightened. My grandmother, actually. Mom always said she was the strongest woman she ever knew. Marcus's grip tightened on his mug. Your mother, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Is she from around here? Lily nodded, her ponytail bobbing. Born and raised, though she left for a while when she was younger, always said she needed to find herself or something. She rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Parents, right? Marcus forced a chuckle, his mind racing. The timing fit. The resemblance was undeniable. Could it really be possible? I'm sorry, Lily said suddenly, looking embarrassed. I don't usually chat so much with customers. You just remind me of someone. What can I get you to eat? Marcus ordered without really thinking, his appetite gone. As Lily walked away, he pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking slightly as he typed out a message to his old friend, Tom. I think I just met my daughter. The one I never knew existed. The reply came almost instantly. What? Are you sure? Where are you? Marcus glanced up, watching as Lily moved efficiently behind the counter, laughing at something another waitress said. He typed back, Rosie's Diner. Get here, now. As he waited for his food, and for Tom, Marcus's mind wandered back to that summer, 23 years ago. He'd been young, reckless, home on leave, and eager to forget the horrors he'd seen. Sarah had been a balm to his wounded soul, her laughter and zest for life infectious. They'd spent 2 blissful weeks together before he'd shipped out again. He'd promised to write, to come back to her. But then the ambush happened, and his world had exploded in a hail of gunfire and shrapnel. He'd woken up in a hospital bed weeks later, half his body in casts, the other half gone. In the grueling months of recovery and rehabilitation that followed, he'd pushed away everyone who tried to get close, including Sarah. He'd convinced himself it was for the best, that she deserved better than a broken man. He'd never known she was pregnant. The bell above the door chimed again, and Marcus looked up to see Tom striding in, his eyes scanning the diner until they landed on Marcus. Tom's face, once as youthful and carefree as Marcus's own, now bore the same lines of worry and experience. But his eyes still held that glint of mischief that had gotten them into, and out of, so much trouble in their youth. All right, old man, Tom said, sliding into the booth across from Marcus. What's this about a long-lost daughter? Before Marcus could respond, Lily appeared with his food. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in Tom. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were expecting company. Can I get you anything, sir?" Tom ordered a coffee, his eyes darting between Lily and Marcus. As soon as she was out of earshot, he leaned forward. "Holy shit, Mark, she looks just like—" "I know," Marcus cut him off. "But it's impossible, right? I mean, what are the odds?" Tom sat back, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I don't know, man, but you always said Sarah was from around here, and the timing, it fits, doesn't it?" Marcus nodded, his food lying untouched before him. "But why wouldn't she have told me? Why keep it a secret all these years?" "Maybe she tried," Tom suggested gently. "You weren't exactly available after what happened." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd spent years building walls around himself, pushing away anyone who tried to get close. Had he inadvertently shut out his own child? As Lily approached with Tom's coffee, Marcus made a split-second decision. "Lily," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I hope this isn't too forward, but is your mother's name Sarah? Sarah Callahan?" The mug slipped from Lily's grasp, shattering on the floor and sending hot coffee splashing across their feet. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock. How do you know that name?" she whispered. The diner had gone quiet, all eyes on their corner booth. Marcus swallowed hard, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. "Because," he said softly, "I think I might be your father." The silence that followed was deafening. Lily stood frozen, her eyes darting between Marcus and Tom, disbelief etched across her features. Then, without a word, she turned and fled, disappearing through the swinging doors that led to the kitchen. "Well," Tom said, breaking the tension. "That could have gone better." Marcus buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. He'd spent years imagining what it would be like to have a family, to be a father. But not like this. Never like this. The sound of the kitchen doors swinging open again made him look up. But it wasn't Lily who emerged. Instead, a woman in her 40s strode towards their table, her face a mask of fury and fear. Marcus's heart clenched as he recognized her immediately. Sarah. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Marcus?" she hissed, her voice low but intense. "You have no right to come in here and drop bombs like that on my daughter." Marcus held up his hands, placating. "Sarah, I swear, I had no idea. I just came in for a meal and what?" Sarah cut him off. "Decided to play detective? Figured you'd waltz back into our lives after all these years?" Tom stood, placing a calming hand on Sarah's arm. "Hey, come on. Let's all take a breath here. There's obviously a lot to talk about, but maybe not in the middle of the diner, yeah?" Sarah shrugged off his touch, but some of the fight seemed to leave her. She glanced around, suddenly aware of the audience they'd attracted. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "My office, now." As Sarah led them through the diner, Marcus realized with a start that she must be the owner now. The girl who'd once dreamed of seeing the world had ended up running the very diner she'd sworn she'd escape. He wondered what other dreams she'd had to set aside. The office was small but tidy, crammed with filing cabinets and a desk overflowing with papers. Sarah closed the door behind them, leaning against it as if to physically block their escape. "All right," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Start talking." Marcus took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. For everything. For leaving. For not being there. I never knew about Lily. If you had, what?" Sarah challenged. "You would have come running back? Played happy families? We both know that's not true, Marcus. You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with me, with any of us after you got hurt." The words stung, but Marcus knew they were true. He'd pushed everyone away, convinced he was protecting them from the broken shell of a man he'd become, but in doing so, he'd missed out on the most important thing in the world. "You're right," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I was a coward. I was scared and angry, and I took it out on everyone who tried to help. But Sarah, if I had known about Lily, it would have changed everything." Sarah's expression softened slightly, a flicker of the girl he'd once known shining through. "Maybe," she said quietly. "But we'll never know, will we? What I do know is that I've spent the last 23 years raising an amazing young woman, a woman who's never needed to know about the father who wasn't there." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, the weight of missed opportunities and lost years pressing down on him. "So what now?" Tom asked, breaking the heavy silence. "You can't just pretend this didn't happen. Lily knows something's up." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair, a gesture so familiar it made Marcus's heart ache. "I don't know," she admitted. I never planned for this day." Just then, a soft knock on the door made them all jump. Sarah opened it to reveal Lily, her eyes red-rimmed but her chin lifted defiantly. "I want to know," she said, her voice steadier than Marcus would have expected. "I want to know everything. No more secrets." Sarah looked at her daughter for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, but not here. Not like this. Why don't we all meet at the house tonight? We can talk properly." As they filed out of the office, the weight of unspoken words and years of silence hanging between them, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change irrevocably. For better or worse, the truth was finally coming to light. Little did he know, the biggest shocks were yet to come. The drive to Sarah's house that evening was the longest of Marcus's life. Tom had offered to come along for moral support, but Marcus had declined. This was something he needed to face on his own. As he pulled up to the modest two-story home, its white picket fence a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart, Marcus took a deep breath. He'd faced down enemy fire, endured months of grueling physical therapy, and learned to navigate a world that wasn't built for someone in a wheelchair, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Sarah answered the door, her face a carefully neutral mask. "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let him pass. Marcus maneuvered his chair through the doorway, acutely aware of how out of place he felt in this home he'd never known. Lily was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in Marcus's wheelchair, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. "Hi," Marcus said awkwardly, suddenly at a loss for words. Lily nodded in response, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. The silence stretched between them, thick with unasked questions and unspoken fears. Sarah cleared her throat. "Why don't we start at the beginning?" she suggested, taking a seat next to Lily. "Marcus, why don't you tell Lily about how we met?" Marcus nodded, grateful for the direction. He began to speak, haltingly at first, then with more confidence as the memories flooded back. He told Lily about that summer, about how he and Sarah had fallen for each other hard and fast. He spoke of his deployment, the promises they'd made, the letters they'd exchanged. And then he told her about the ambush. His voice grew hoarse as he described waking up in the hospital, the pain, the fear, the anger that had consumed him. "I pushed everyone away," he admitted, unable to meet Lily's eyes. "I thought I was protecting them, protecting your mother, from having to deal with this." He gestured to his wheelchair. Sarah picked up the thread of the story, explaining how she'd discovered she was pregnant just weeks after Marcus had cut off all contact. "I tried to reach you," she said, her voice soft. "But your family said you didn't want to speak to anyone. And then I heard about your injuries. I didn't want to burden you with a baby on top of everything else." Lily listened intently, her expression a mix of confusion and dawning understanding. "But why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, turning to her mother. "Why let me believe my father was just gone?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "I didn't want you to feel abandoned or unwanted. It was easier to let you think he was just out of the picture than to explain why he wasn't here. The room fell silent as they all absorbed the weight of these revelations. Marcus felt a surge of emotions, anger at the years lost, gratitude for Sarah's strength in raising Lily alone, and an overwhelming sense of regret for the choices he'd made. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "To both of you. I know it doesn't change anything, but if I could go back—" Lily held up a hand, stopping him. "You can't," she said simply. "None of us can. But maybe we can move forward?" Her words hung in the air, a tentative olive branch. Marcus felt a glimmer of hope, but before he could respond, a sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Sarah frowned, rising to answer it. Who could that be at this hour? As she opened the door, Marcus heard a familiar voice that sent a chill down his spine. "Hello, Sarah. Long time no see." Colonel James Riker stepped into the living room, his military bearing at odds with the casual setting. His eyes locked onto Marcus, a hint of a smirk playing at his lips. "Well, well," Riker said. "The prodigal son returns." And just in time, too. Marcus's mind raced. Riker had been his commanding officer, the man who'd sent him on that fateful mission, the man who'd visited him in the hospital with veiled threats about national security and the importance of keeping certain things quiet. "What are you doing here?" Marcus demanded, his hand instinctively moving to the arm of his wheelchair, ready to defend himself if necessary. Riker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, is that any way to greet an old friend? Especially one who's come all this way to deliver some interesting news?" Sarah moved to stand protectively in front of Lily. "I think you should leave," she said, her voice steely. "This is a private family matter." "Oh, I'm afraid it's much more than that," Riker replied, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "You see, I've recently come into possession of some rather fascinating information. Information that concerns all of you, especially you, Lily." Lily's eyes widened. "Me? But I don't even know you." Riker's gaze swept over them all, lingering on Marcus. "Oh, but you do. Or at least your DNA does. You see, Lily, you're not just the daughter of a war hero. You're the key to unlocking a secret that's been buried for over 2 decades. Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Riker, don't. Whatever you think you know—" "I know everything, Holloway," Riker cut him off. "About the real reason for that mission, about the experiments, and about the unique genetic markers that were passed down to your offspring." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What is he talking about, Marcus?" Marcus's mind raced, memories he'd long suppressed bubbling to the surface. The secret briefings, the strange injections, the superhuman strength and speed he'd experienced in the field, abilities that had vanished after his injury. "It wasn't just a routine patrol," he said slowly, the truth spilling out after years of silence. "We were test subjects, guinea pigs for some kind of enhancement program, but it went wrong. The ambush, it wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up." Riker nodded, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Very good, Holloway. But you're missing the most important part. The enhancements, they didn't just disappear, they became part of your genetic code. And now—" He turned to Lily, his gaze intense. "Now they've manifested in your daughter." Lily shook her head, backing away. "This is insane. I don't have any special abilities." "Are you sure about that?" Riker pressed. "Never experienced moments of inexplicable strength? Reflexes faster than should be possible? Healing from injuries at an accelerated rate?" Marcus watched as confusion, then realization dawned on Lily's face. He thought back to the way she'd moved in the diner, the inhuman speed with which she'd caught that falling mug before it could shatter. "This is why I'm here," Riker continued. "The program has been reactivated, and Lily is the key to perfecting it." Sarah moved to stand between Riker and her daughter. "Absolutely not," she snarled. "You're not touching her." Riker's hand moved to his hip, where Marcus could see the outline of a concealed weapon. "I'm afraid you don't have a choice. National security and all that. Lily will be coming with me, voluntarily or not." The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus's mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. He locked eyes with Lily, seeing the fear and confusion swirling in her gaze. In that moment, something shifted. A connection, forged through shared DNA and newfound understanding, sparked between them. And Marcus knew, with absolute certainty, that he would do whatever it took to protect the daughter he'd just found. "Riker," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "You're not taking her anywhere. Not now, not ever." Riker's hand tightened on his weapon. "And how exactly do you plan to stop me, Holloway?" "In case you haven't noticed, you're not exactly in fighting shape." Marcus smiled, a fierce, determined grin that seemed to take years off his weathered face. "Maybe not," he agreed. "But I'm still a soldier. And more importantly, I'm a father. And you'd be amazed at what a father will do to protect his child." With a speed that belied his disability, Marcus lunged forward, tackling Riker to the ground. The colonel's gun skittered across the floor, coming to rest at Lily's feet. As they grappled, Marcus shouted, "Lily, Sarah, run! Get out of here!" But Lily didn't run. Instead, she picked up the gun, her hands steady as she aimed it at Riker. "Let him go," she commanded, her voice ringing with an authority beyond her years. Riker froze, his eyes darting between Lily and the weapon in her hands. "You don't want to do this, girl. You have no idea what you're capable of, what you could become." Lily's jaw set, a determination in her eyes that Marcus recognized from his own reflection. "You're right," she said. "I don't know what I'm capable of, but I know who I am. I'm Lily Callahan, daughter of Sarah Callahan and Marcus Holloway, and I'm not going anywhere with you." As sirens wailed in the distance, Sarah must have called the police. Marcus felt a surge of pride unlike anything he'd ever experienced. In the span of a day, he'd gone from a lonely, bitter veteran to a father willing to risk everything for his child. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. There were questions to be answered, truths to be uncovered, and a shadowy government program to be exposed. But as Marcus looked at Lily, standing tall and unafraid, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the first police cars pulled up outside, Marcus realized that his act of walking into a diner had set in motion a chain of events he never could have predicted. But in facing the truth, in choosing to embrace the family he never knew he had found a strength he never knew he possessed. The reunited family stood together, waiting for the approaching authorities. Their future was uncertain, but for the first time in decades, it was built on a foundation of truth and newfound love, and for Marcus, that was more than enough. As the first officers entered the house, Marcus caught Lily's eye and smiled. Sometimes, he realized, the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest acts. And sometimes, the family you find is not the one you expected, but the one you choose to fight for, even in the face of impossible odds.